The plate didn't break. It went over the edge of the table, turned once in the candlelight, and landed face down on the carpet with a sound like a wet towel dropping. Half a ribeye. Asparagus my husband had cut for me because my hands were still cold from the drive. 15 seconds before that, I was folding my napkin into thirds. That's a work habit. I fold everything into thirds: gauze, chart paper, the corner of a blanket over a man's legs, while his blood goes out one line and comes back the other. 9 chairs at that table. A candle in red glass. A three-piece band butchering a song from the summer I got married. There is a rule in my family that nobody has ever said out loud. We do not make scenes where strangers can watch. My sister stood up first. 10 years. She said it to the table, not to me, in the same warm voice she uses in the fundraising videos they play in hospital waiting rooms. Her wine was still level in her hand. 10 years and nothing in you. No baby, no house. Her fingers came down flat on the rim of my plate. The tablecloth pulled. Water jumped in every glass. Your father is walking around with my kidney in him. She tipped her chin at the empty place where my dinner had been. What has he got of yours? Why does a woman like you even get a chair? Nobody at that table said my name. My thumb found the ridge on my left index finger, an old needle scar from a January shift, and pressed until it went white. I put my napkin on the table, still folded in thirds. My sister had told all of us she booked the room. At the door, the girl with the menus had read a different name off her screen and walked us in without ever saying ours. So I got up and asked the manager for tonight's reservation confirmation, party of 9. He came back with a warm sheet of paper that smelled like toner. My mother took it out of my hand before I could turn it over. She read it once. She read it again, and the paper started shaking, and then she slammed it face down on the bread plate and screamed loud enough that the band stopped playing. Take it back before your father sees that name. My father was 40 feet away at the bar, asking the bartender for more ice. He came back with the glass in both hands, walking the way he walks now, heel first, careful on carpet. He looked at the floor where my dinner was. He looked at my mother's hand flat on a piece of paper. Somebody drop something? Your daughter's clumsy, my mother said. The busboy came with a little brush and a dustpan and worked around my shoes. My sister sat down and put her napkin back across her lap and asked the table if anyone wanted to split a dessert. 2 of my cousins said yes. That's the part I keep going back to. Not the plate, the dessert. My mother folded the printout into her purse and clipped the purse shut, and for the rest of the meal she kept one hand on the outside of it, the way you hold a dog's collar. I drove us home. Nolan didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes, which is how I know he's furious. He goes quiet the way a house goes quiet when the power cuts. At a red light, he reached over and put his hand flat on my thigh. You're not clumsy, he said. I know. Myra, I know. I had the wheel at 10 and 2. I have driven that stretch of road 3 mornings a week for 2 years of my life, in the dark, with my father in the passenger seat and a bag of his things in the back. Every pothole on it is a thing I could find with my eyes shut. If you've ever been the person who drives, the one who does the getting up at 4, the one nobody thanks because thanking you would mean admitting somebody had to, then stay with me tonight. I'm not going to be dramatic about it. I'm just going to tell you what was on that paper and what it cost me to find out. Tell me in the comments whether you'd have gone back for it, because I went back for it. Friday morning. I finished my shift at 1, drove straight there, and walked into that restaurant while they were setting up for lunch. The chairs were still on the tables. The carpet was clean. I told the manager I wanted to pay for the plate. He said that wasn't necessary. He said it twice, and then he said the thing people say when they've watched something they'd rather not have watched. It happens. It doesn't actually, I said. Can I get another copy of last night's reservation record? My mother took mine. I didn't ask why. He went into the office behind the host stand, and I heard the printer chew, and he brought it out and set it on the wood in front of me and did not look at it. Party of 9, 18 June, 7:15 p.m., booked by phone on the 2nd of June at 10:14 in the morning. A note in the special requests line: quiet table, no window, no shellfish at the head setting. And under guest, in that flat computer print that makes everything look like a lab result, Doyle Emmett. Below it, in the profile line, the system keeps on people who come back, 2 visits. I stood in the doorway of a steakhouse at 1:30 in the afternoon and read a stranger's name 3 times. Not my mother's name, not my sister's, and she had spent all week telling everyone she'd handled it. She always handles it. Handling things is how she's loved in our family. A man's name, twice at that table before, and a food note at the head of the table, and my father's chairs at the head of the table. I put the paper in my bag. I paid for the plate anyway, $31. Then I went home and slept 4 hours because I had to be at Cedar Ridge at 4:30 the next morning. Here's what I do, so the rest of this makes sense. I'm a dialysis technician. Certified, 11 years. I set up the machines, I cannulate the access, I sit with people while a pump takes their blood out at 300 milliliters a minute, cleans it, and gives it back. I watch pressures. I watch faces. You learn a lot about a family by who comes to pick somebody up at 8 in the morning on a Wednesday. Machine 6 is mine. Mr. Alderman is in the chair by the window on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and he brings me butterscotch candies his daughter buys in bulk and tells me the same story about a Buick every single time, and I let him, because the story is not the point of the story. Saturday I taped a line, checked his access, and got the flow where I wanted it, and he said, "You're quiet today, Sheridan. Long week. You look like a woman doing math." I was. I'd been doing it since 1:30 the previous afternoon, and the math kept coming out the same, and it kept not making sense, and both of those things were true at once. We are not a rich family. My father welded for 31 years, and my mother did the books for a heating and cooling outfit. And there was never a stranger at our table who wasn't from the parish or the Union Hall. My mother's address book is a physical object. She knows the name of everyone who has ever eaten in her house. She reads the paper for the obituaries first. And she had screamed in a restaurant with 200 strangers in it. Sunday, I went to my parents' house for dinner because I go to my parents' house for dinner. 15 years of Sundays. You could put it on a chart. My mother had a pot roast in, and the windows were open, and the kitchen smelled like it has smelled my entire life. My father was in his chair with the TV on a golf tournament he wasn't watching, and on the refrigerator, under a magnet shaped like a pineapple, was a piece of graph paper with my handwriting on it. It's a schedule. I made it in the fall of 2014, and I redid it every 8 weeks for 2 years, and the columns are the days and the rows are the times. 3:45 MEWF pick up dad, 4:15 chair, 9:30 mom picks up. Every Sunday I'd cross out the old one and tape up the new one so my mother would know when he had to fast, and my sister would know which mornings she didn't need to worry about, though she never worried about them, because I was doing them. The last one is still up there. He never let her take it down. It's gone soft and gray at the folds, and there's a grease spot in the corner from 10 years of a kitchen. My father caught me looking at it. "Your handwriting's still ugly," he said. "It's efficient. That's what ugly people say." "That's as close as he gets, I'll take it." I waited until my mother was drying the good serving spoon, which is when she is most herself, and I set the printout on the counter face up. "Who's Emmett Doyle?" The spoon kept moving in the towel, around and around and around. "A man from the Union Hall," she said. "How was at my anniversary dinner? He's been at 2 others. He knows your father from way back." "Then why did you scream at me in a restaurant?" My mother put the spoon in the drawer and closed the drawer with her hip. Her hands were red from the water. She has arthritis in the left one, and she was working the thumb the way she does when it aches, pressing it into her palm. "Because you embarrassed us," she said, "asking that boy for papers like you're a police officer. You read it twice." I read slow, Myra. "She has done the books for a heating and cooling company since 1988. She reads a column of numbers faster than anyone I have ever met." That was the moment, not the plate. Standing in my mother's kitchen listening to her tell me she reads slow. The front door went, and my sister came in with her coat still on, and a stack of glossy paper in her hand, and the temperature of the room changed the way it always does, and my mother's face did something I can only describe as relief. "There she is," my mother said. Corinne dropped the stack on the table. "She's 38. She has good hair and the kind of posture they teach you in a media training seminar, and she does development work for the Northlight Kidney Foundation, which means she raises money, which means she stands at the front of rooms. Programs came back from the printer," she said. "Mom, they used the good photo." She fanned them out on the table like cards. Heavy stock. A ballroom on the front, And a date. The 25th of July. Fairhaven Regional Transplant Center. 10th Annual Living Donor Celebration. And on page 2, a photograph of my sister in a green dress, and under it, Honoree, Corinne Vance. 10 years ago, Corinne gave her father a kidney. Tonight we honor the family who taught us what giving looks like. Under that, smaller, in the italic type they use for the people who are only there to be the reason. Recipient, Gareth Vance. My father's name in print in a program, for a room of people who would clap at it. He came in from the living room to see what the fuss was, and picked one up, and held it out at arm's length the way he has to now, and read it with his mouth moving a little. "Would you look at that?" he said. I was smiling. "That's the thing I want you to hold on to." My father was smiling at a piece of paper, and my sister put her arm around his shoulders for the photo my mother took on her phone, and I stood by the refrigerator next to a schedule in my own handwriting from 2014. I said, "Corinne, who's Emmett Doyle?" She didn't turn around. She adjusted my father's collar, patted it flat, and said, "Somebody Mom knows," in the voice you use to answer a child asking about a noise in the walls. Then she looked at me over her shoulder, and she smiled, and she said, "Don't be strange at the gala. There'll be press." That night, I sat in my car outside my parents' house with the engine off and typed a name into my phone. Emmett Doyle, 52, Marlow County, 2 towns over, 40 minutes on the state route. A paint shop that closed in 2019. A church softball roster from a long time ago. An address on a road I've driven past 1,000 times going to the outlet mall. A man who lived 40 minutes from my mother's kitchen, who had sat in that dining room with my family twice, and whose name had never once been in my mother's mouth in 34 years. Monday I did the most boring thing a person can do, and it is the reason I am able to tell you any of this. I drove to Fairhaven Regional, went past the transplant clinic where I have sat in the waiting room more times than I can count, and found the medical records office in the basement next to the loading dock. There's a window with a sliding glass panel and a laminated sign about processing times. I filled out a request for my own records. That's all it is. You are allowed to have your own file. Not your husband's, not your father's, not your sister's, yours. You fill out the form, you show a driver's license. They have 30 days. They can take another 30 if they write and tell you why. The woman behind the glass asked what department. Living donor program, I said. Evaluation file, summer of 2016. She typed. She stopped typing. She looked at the screen a second longer than she needed to, and then she printed my receipt and slid it under the glass and said, "You'll get a call." I put the receipt in the zipper pocket of my bag with the reservation printout. Then I drove to Cedar Ridge after my shift and asked our office manager for my own payroll and time records for August of 2016. She laughed at me. She said, "Nobody's ever asked me for that." She said the old punch data is on a server the company keeps for 7 years, and the paper backups are in the storage room behind the water heater and banker's boxes by year. Tessa was coming off shift and heard the end of it, and she leaned in the doorway with her coffee and said, 2016. That's the year your dad was on the machine. 2014 through 16. You did every Monday, she sipped. You did every Monday for 2 years, Sheridan, and then you got married in the middle of it and came back on Wednesday. It was a Saturday wedding. That's my point, she said and went home. Here's what I remembered, standing in a storage room that smelled like hot metal. August 2016. I was 24. My father had been on dialysis for 2 years, and he had gotten small in a way I could measure. I'm the one who weighed him, pre and post, 3 times a week, and I watched a man go from 206 pounds to 172 in 24 months. I had done the workup. All of it. Blood type, tissue typing, 24-hour urine, the psychosocial interview where a woman asks you whether anyone is pressuring you and you say no and she writes it down. The CT with contrast where they map your arteries. I took a personal day for the imaging and told my supervisor I had a dentist thing because I didn't want it in the unit's mouth before it was real. And then, on a Saturday, in the parking lot of a Kohl's, my sister told me I wasn't a match. She had picked me up. That was unusual enough that it should have been a flag, but she'd said she had to return a comforter, and did I want to get lunch? And in the car, she put her hand on my arm at a stop sign and said, the center had called her because she was down as the family contact, And there was no easy way to say it, sweetheart. You're not a match. Antibodies. Something in my blood that would fight him. I remember the exact bag she was holding. It was one of those big blue plastic ones with the rope handles. I cried in the passenger seat with my hands over my mouth so I wouldn't be loud, and my sister rubbed my back and said, "Don't tell Dad, he'll feel guilty. Let me handle it." Nobody from the center ever called me, not once. No letter, no follow-up, no results, nothing. And at the time, I thought that was mercy. I thought, they told the family contact and the family contact told me, and that's how it works. And I am too tired to chase a piece of paper that says my body is the wrong shape. 6 weeks later, my father got his kidney, and the story of who gave it to him assembled itself in that house without anyone ever sitting me down and telling it to me directly. Corinne was in the hospital for 4 days that September. She came out with 3 small dressings on her abdomen, and she was pale and she moved like it hurt, because it did hurt, and my mother made her soup and my aunts came in shifts. At Thanksgiving, my uncle raised a glass to her. By Christmas, the sentence had its final form, and everybody in the family could say it the same way, like a line from a hymn. Your sister gave your father a kidney. I said it too. That's the part I can't get out from under. For 10 years, I said it to people at work. I said it at a baby shower once, to explain why I was crying in a kitchen. Tuesday, I picked my father up at 7 for his clinic appointment, because Tuesdays are mine. Post-transplant, he goes every 8 weeks for labs and a look. And I take him, and afterward we go to the diner on Route 9 and he gets eggs over hard and complains about them. I was on the porch with his jacket on 20 minutes early, the way he always is. In the car, he said, "Your sister says you're mad about the dinner." "I'm not mad. She says you're taking it hard." "Dad, I'm just repeating what's said to me." He looked out the window. "Your mother threw out the rest of my ice cream." At the clinic, they took his blood pressure and his labs, and the coordinator asked him if he was taking his tacrolimus at the same times every day, and he said, "Yes, sir, 12 and 12, and looked at me to confirm it, because I'm the one who fills his pill organizer on Sundays. In the parking lot afterward, he stopped with his hand on the door. "They're going to put me at a table with a microphone at that thing," he said, "in July." "I know. I don't like a microphone." He got in. "But your sister worked hard on it." I drove him home and sat outside my parents' house for a minute after he went in, and my phone lit up on the passenger seat with my sister's name. She wanted coffee. She was buying. We met at a place downtown with too much light in it. She came in gym clothes with her hair up, which is a costume she wears the way other people wear a suit, and she hugged me before I could get my arm up. "You're being weird," she said. "Let's just clear it. You put your hand on my dinner and pushed it onto the floor." I put my hand on the table. She stirred her drink. "You know what my week had been, Myra. You have no idea what carrying this family looks like from where I sit." There it was, on the table between us. I let it sit. My father used to say a good weld is mostly waiting. "Who's Emmett Doyle?" I said. Her spoon did one more slow turn against the inside of the cup, and then she set it on the napkin, wet side down, and lined it up square with the edge. "Old friend of Dad's," she said. "Mom says Union Hall, you say old friend. Both things can be true. He sat at that table twice and no one has ever said his name in front of Dad." My sister leaned back. She looked at me with real warmth. And this is the thing that people who have never lived with someone like her do not understand. The warmth is not fake. It's a tool, and it's warm. "You want me to be honest?" she said. "You've had a hard 10 years, no baby, that house thing, Nolan's overtime. Nobody blames you for wanting something to be somebody's fault." I drank my coffee. "But Dad has maybe 5 good years," she said. "Maybe. And if you make him choose between us, you will not like which way that goes." She picked up her cup and blew across it. "I would hate for it to go that way." Then she asked about Nolan's mother's hip, and I answered, "Because I am my mother's daughter, and we do not make scenes where strangers can watch." I drove home with my hands at 10 and 2. That night, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and did the second boring thing. I logged into the credit union where I have banked since I was 17. I have an account there my mother's name is also on. Because when I was 17, she took me down to open it and said a girl needs somewhere her paycheck goes that isn't her purse. Every paycheck I ever got, from the pizza place at 17 through my first 2 years at the unit, went into it. That was the house money. Nolan and I called it the house money out loud, at that table, for years. The last time I had opened that account online was 2016. The balance was $11 and change. I already knew that. I want to be honest about what I knew and when. In the spring of 2016, my mother sat at our table and told me the money had to go for your father's care, Myra. We'll put it back. And I said, okay, because he was going to die. And because you can't hold a savings account up next to a dying man and win that argument. And because I was 24 and it did not occur to me to ask for a number. I never asked for the number 10 years. I clicked into the history, and the credit union keeps everything, and there it was in that same flat print. March 2016. 3 withdrawals in 6 days. Cashier's checks, all three. 12,000, 12,000, 14,000, $38,000. My father's transplant was covered. I want to be very clear, because I have worked in this world for 11 years, and I know what people assume. The surgery, the hospital, the drugs, the donor's entire workup and operation. Insurance covers all of it. The recipient's insurance pays for the donor's medical care. That is how it works in this country. Nobody pays a hospital $38,000 in cashier's checks in March for a transplant that happens in September. I sat there with a mug going cold and pulled up the county recorder's site, which is free and which anyone can use, and typed in my parents' address, a home equity line of credit against the house on Delaney Street. Opened October 2016. A modification increasing the line, recorded in January of 2018. 3 cashier's checks in the spring. A line against the house in the fall. A man's name on a reservation. 2 visits before this one. No shellfish. Quiet table. I closed the laptop and stood in my kitchen, and my hands wanted something, so they found the dish towel on the oven handle, and I folded it in half, and then in thirds, and then in thirds again, until it was the size of a playing card, and my thumbnail had a white line pressed into it. Nolan came out in his work socks and stood in the doorway. How much, he said. I told him. He sat down on the floor, not in a chair, on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinet, and he put his forearms on his knees and looked at the linoleum for a while. That was the down payment, he said. Yes. That was the... He stopped. He is a careful man. Myra, that was the 22,000 from the clinic too. That was the whole thing. I didn't answer that one. I couldn't that night. Sunday, I went back to Delaney Street with a folder in my bag, and I waited until my father was in the yard doing the thing he does, where he inspects the gutter and doesn't touch it, and I put the printed account history on the counter next to my mother's cutting board. I want to know where the house money went. My mother wiped her hands. She looked at the paper the way she looked at the reservation printout. Once fast, once slow. That went to your father's life, she said. His surgery was covered, his medication was covered, his donor's surgery was covered. I kept my voice where I keep it at work, at 4 in the morning, when a man's pressure drops, and everyone else in the room needs me to sound like the weather. $38,000 in cashier's checks in March, Mom. What did you buy? Don't you use that tone in my kitchen. What did you buy? She put both hands on the counter edge and leaned into them, and her thumb was working her palm, around and around. You have no idea what we did to keep him, she said. You were 24. You were planning a wedding. I was picking him up at 4:30 in the morning. Anyone can drive a car. The screen door banged. My father was standing in the kitchen doorway with his gardening gloves in one hand, and he had that look he gets when he's caught the end of a sentence and is trying to place it, and he said, "What money?" My mother got to him before I did. "Nothing, Gareth. Bank business." She was already crossing the kitchen with the towel, already reaching for his gloves. "Go wash. You've got dirt to your elbows." He looked at me. He has blue eyes that have gone pale the way old denim goes pale, and he stood in that doorway a half second too long with his mouth slightly open, and then he did what he has done in that kitchen for 41 years. He went and washed his hands. I picked my folder up off the counter. My mother watched me put it in my bag. "You'll ruin him," she said quietly, so it wouldn't carry. "Whatever this is, he's got 5 good years and you'll spend them on this." "I haven't done anything yet." "You went to a restaurant and asked for papers." "I asked for a receipt, Mom. People do it every day." I drove home. At the light on Route 9, I sat behind a pickup with a dog in the back and thought about the number 22,000, which is what a clinic in Columbus wanted from us in 2024. Up front, non-refundable, for one cycle with my eggs at 32 years old. I didn't have 22,000. I had $11 and change in a joint account with my mother's name on it. The next morning, I wrote a letter by hand, because a letter is a thing a person can throw away, privately, and I wanted him to be able to. Mr. Doyle, my name is Myra Sheridan. I'm Gareth Vance's younger daughter. I'm not asking you for anything and I'm not angry with you. I would like 15 minutes. Any public place. Here's my number. I drove it out to the house on the county road and put it in the mailbox at 7 in the morning on my way in. And I didn't linger, and I didn't look at the windows. He called me 4 days later at 9 at night. He had a slow voice with a lot of gravel in it. He said, "You're Gary's girl." Then he said, "Is he alive?" "Not how is he, is he?" "He's alive," I said. "He's 70 in October." The line was quiet long enough that I checked the screen. "There's a diner on Route 9, he said. "The one with the pie sign. I go Thursdays." I was in the corner booth with his back to the wall when I got there, and he stood up when I came over, which is a thing men his age do. 52. Big through the shoulders and gone soft over it, gray at the temples, work boots with paint on them from a shop that closed in 2019. His ankles were swollen over the tops of the boots. I have looked at 10,000 pairs of ankles. He'd already ordered me coffee, he'd remembered to. "You're not with the foundation," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "No. They send letters at Christmas." He turned his cup around. "Never a person." We talked about my father for a while because he wanted to. He asked what his creatinine ran. He asked if he'd kept the weight on. He asked whether he still did that thing where he says he'll fix a gutter and then just looks at it. And when I laughed, he looked down at the table and smiled at it. And I want you to sit with that for a second. A man 40 minutes away had been keeping track of my father's gutters. Then I put the reservation printout on the table and turned it toward him. "You were at my anniversary dinner," I said. "June 18th, your name booked the room." I looked at it a long time. "I didn't come," he said. "I was going to. I got as far as the parking lot." "Why did they invite you?" "They didn't invite me." He pushed the paper back an inch. "I booked it. Your sister asks me to book things sometimes, under my name." The waitress came and filled his cup and asked if we wanted anything, and he said, "No thank you, ma'am," and waited until she was 3 tables away. "That's the arrangement," he said. "What arrangement?" And here is where the floor went out, and I need you to understand that he did not say it as a confession. He said it the way you say something to a person who obviously already knows it, because he had been carrying it for 10 years and had never once had a conversation about it with anyone in my family who wasn't managing him. "You know," he said, "you're the one who backed out." The coffee cup was warm. I kept both hands on it. "Say that again." "Your sister told me." He was gentle about it, that's the thing. He was being kind to me. Right before, she said the daughter was a match, but she got scared and quit on him, and they had 2 months and a father dying, so she found me. She said you couldn't live with it, and nobody was to bring it up in front of you. I could hear the dishwasher going in the back. I could hear a man 3 booths down laughing at something on his phone. "Mr. Doyle," I said, "whose kidney is in my father?" He turned his left hand over on the table, and then he pulled his shirt out of his waistband on that side, just a few inches, and there it was above the belt line. A scar about the length of my hand, silvered, and the 3 small round ones up and to the left. "Mine," he said. 10 years, 500 Sunday dinners. Every single time my sister stood in a room and let people say what they said. The waitress came back with the pot and I told her yes please, and she filled my cup and I said thank you, and my voice did the thing my voice does, which is nothing. "I'm going to ask you a question," I said. "And I'm not a police officer and I'm not recording this." 55, he said. 55 what? Thousand. He looked at the window. 38 up front. The rest after, in 2 pieces, when they could get it. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the table. "My wife had cancer. That's not an excuse. That's just the year it was." Outside, a truck downshifted on the state route. I looked at his ankles again, and at the color under his eyes, and I asked him a technician's question, because it was the only one I could hold on to. "When did you last have labs?" He said 98, 99 maybe. 1998? "No," he said, the little number they give you." His last creatinine was 1.98, and it was 4 years old, and he'd gotten it at an urgent care because his hands were swelling, and they told him to follow up with a nephrologist, and he didn't have a nephrologist because he'd never had one, because in 10 years nobody had ever sent him to one. You are supposed to be followed. Every living donor in this country gets registered and followed. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It is required. It is somebody's job. He had a hospital bracelet in a drawer at home and a scar and no doctor. I paid the check. He tried to and I said no and he let me, and that was somehow the worst part of the whole hour. In the parking lot he stopped by his truck. I was going to die, he said. Your dad. Whatever else is true about me, that's true. I know it. Are you going to make trouble for me? No, I said. I'm going to make you an appointment. I sat in my car and I didn't cry. I put my forehead on the top of the steering wheel and stayed there while the engine ticked. And then I straightened up, and my hands went to 10 and 2 on a wheel that wasn't moving, and I drove home the long way with the windows down. Nolan was up. He took one look at me in the doorway and didn't ask anything for a full minute. Doyle, I said, the kidney is Doyle's. He put his hand over his mouth and stood there in his socks. She was in the hospital, he said. Myra, I carried a chair up their porch steps for her. I remember her recovery. I remember it too. That week I did 4 things, and I did them in order, because when a machine alarms you do not run, you go left to right across the panel. I called Fairhaven's Living Donor Program and got Mr. Doyle registered for the donor follow-up clinic, which is free, which is covered, and which not one person had ever mentioned to him. They had an opening on the 9th of July. I called Northlight Kidney Foundation's public line and asked, as any member of the public may, how honorees are selected for the Living Donor Celebration. A very pleasant young man told me the foundation compiles the honoree list from community nominations and donor self-identification, and that the transplant center hosts the event and presents the pins. Self-identification. She nominated herself, and no one at that center had a reason on earth to check. I made a list, on graph paper, of every document that could exist in the world about the summer of 2016, and I waited for an envelope. You should know what I was waiting with. In 2019, I lost a pregnancy at 9 weeks. In 2022, I lost one at 11. In between, there were 2 years of ovulation strips in a drawer and a chart on my phone and Nolan not asking. After the second one, a doctor with a kind voice used the phrase unexplained recurrent loss and told me that in a lot of cases there simply isn't an answer and that we could talk about IVF when we were ready. $22,000 upfront, non-refundable. I told my mother about the second one at her kitchen table. She said, "These things happen for a reason," and got up to check the oven. On the 9th of July, I drove Emmett Doyle to the donor follow-up clinic on the 4th floor at Fairhaven, because he told me on the phone that he didn't like parking garages and I understood that to mean something else. I wore a collared shirt. He'd shaved. He brought the hospital bracelet from 2016 in a sandwich bag, and when the girl at the desk asked for his date of birth, he gave her the bracelet instead, and she took it very gently and typed off it and gave it back. The waiting room up there is different from ours downstairs. There are real chairs and a coffee machine and a wall of photographs of people in running bibs. He sat with his hands on his knees and looked at that wall for a while. Nobody told me there was a floor, he said. There's a floor. 10 years. I thought if I got a bill, I'd have to say where it came from. He turned the bag with the bracelet over. So I just didn't go. They took his blood pressure and his blood and they weighed him, and the nurse practitioner spent 40 minutes with him, which I know because I sat in the hall and watched a clock. When he came out, he had a folder in his hand and a follow-up in 3 months and a prescription, and his ears were red. She says they were supposed to have me back 3 times in the first 2 years, he said. She says the kidney I've got left is tired. It is. She didn't blame me. There's nobody to blame you, I said. The center owed you 6 months, a year, 2 years. After that, nobody in this country is required to call anybody, and that is the part that ought to be the crime. I looked at the floor tiles and worked his jaw. Your sister called me every year, he said. Around Christmas. Ask how I was. Tell me your dad was doing good. Did she ever ask about your labs? I thought about it the way an honest man thinks about a question he hasn't liked the shape of before. She asked if I was talking to anybody, he said. In the parking lot. He stopped by his truck again, the way he had at the diner, and he asked me what I was going to do, and I told him the truth, which was that I didn't know yet, and that whatever it was, he would hear it from me first and not from a room. He said, "There's a thing you should know." He was looking at his own hands on the doorframe. The night before, at the hotel, she made me practice. What I'd say if they asked how I knew your dad. What did she tell you to say? Old friend from the shop. He fixed my truck in '99. He shook his head slowly. I never owned that truck in '99. The envelope came on the 14th of July. It was thick. A legal envelope with the hospital's return address, the kind that costs real postage. I brought it in from the mailbox and set it on the passenger seat and drove to work with it there. And it sat in my locker through a whole shift, through 2 treatments and a machine alarm, and Mr. Alderman's Buick story. And I clocked out at 1 and went and sat in my car on the 3rd level of the parking garage where it's shaded, and I opened it with my car key. 41 pages, my name at the top of everyone. Blood type O, 24-hour urine, normal. GFR, excellent. Psychosocial evaluation. Candidate presents as motivated, well-informed, denies coercion. Independent living donor advocate note. No evidence of inducement or pressure. Tissue typing, page 9. Crossmatch, negative, compatible. Compatible. My father's blood and mine, and a lab in that building had said yes. Page 11. The coordinator's chronology. The plain little log they keep with dates and times down the left side. 20. AUG 2006 0912. Telephone contact from family contact of record. Donor candidate withdrawing from evaluation. Family requests no further contact with candidate donation. Chart closed per family request. And stapled behind it, a withdrawal acknowledgement with my name printed on it and a signature over the line that was not my signature. It wasn't even close. Whoever wrote it made the Y at the end of Myra loop backward, the way a person does when they're copying a name off a driver's license upside down. The family contact of record was listed on the intake sheet, page 3, with a phone number. The last 4 digits are 0618. My sister has had that number since she was in high school. 618. She used to say it was lucky. The 18th of June is my wedding anniversary. I'm not making anything of that. It's just a thing I sat in a parking garage and thought about for a while. At 9 in the morning on the 20th of August, 2016, I was standing at machine 6 with my hands inside a glove box, and my sister was on the phone with a coordinator in a building I could see from the parking lot, telling her I had changed my mind. I turned the page. Page 31 is imaging. CT angiography, abdomen and pelvis, with contrast, dated the 3rd of August, 2016. Renal vasculature, single artery bilaterally, suitable for laparoscopic donor nephrectomy. Then, at the bottom, in the section they call incidental findings, 3 lines. Incidental, uterine fundal contour with midline septation, consistent with Müllerian anomaly, septate uterus. Clinical correlation and gynecologic referral recommended. And under that, the routing note, results letter mailed to contact of record. I went back to page 3, to the intake sheet, to the box where a candidate lists who the center may speak to. In my handwriting, my name, my number, my address. Underneath it, in a different pen, in a hand I have known since I could read. Contact of record, with my sister's phone and my sister's mailing address written over the top of mine. Every letter that hospital ever sent about the inside of my body went to my sister's mailbox, because in the summer of 2016, my sister put herself between me and my own results, and a clerk did what the form told her to do. A septate uterus is a wall of tissue down the middle of the uterus, where there shouldn't be one. It is one of the known causes of recurrent pregnancy loss. It is, in a great many cases, corrected in an outpatient procedure that takes under an hour. Somebody in a radiology department at Fairhaven Regional wrote those 3 lines in August of 2016 when I was 24 years old, and put them in an envelope and mailed them to the contact of record. I read the page again. Then I folded it in thirds and the third fold wouldn't sit flat, and I did it again, and it wouldn't sit, and I did it again. There's a sound a person makes in a concrete parking garage that they don't recognize as their own. 9 weeks, 11 weeks, a doctor with a kind voice saying unexplained, I want to say something to you before I go on, because I've had 10 years of practice at swallowing this, and 1 afternoon of practice at saying it out loud. If you've ever been told there was no reason for the worst thing that happened to you, stay with me through the 25th of July. Subscribe if you want to see what a woman with a punch card does in a ballroom. Because that afternoon I stopped trying to find out what happened. That afternoon, I started building the thing I was going to put in front of 250 people. The storage room at Cedar Ridge is behind the water heater, and it is 104 degrees in July. The banker's boxes are stacked by year, and the labels are in 3 different people's handwriting. I found 2016 on the second shelf under a box of retired policy binders, and I sat on the concrete floor with my scrub top stuck to my back and went through August 1 accordion folder at a time. Time records, old style, from before the badge system, printed on that green bar paper. Sheridan M. 20 Aug 2016 in 0431 out 1306. The 20th of August, 2016, was a Saturday. I had taken Tessa's Saturday rotation that whole month so she could get her boy to his tournaments, and it is written in her hand on the assignment sheet in the same box. Below it, the treatment log for Machine 6 that morning, initialed in my own hand at the top of every hour, 05 Hazuru, 06 Hazuru, 07 Hazuru, 08 Hazuru, 09 Hazuru, 10 Hazuru. At 0912 on the 20th of August 2016, I initialed a flow rate. I took it to the office manager and asked her to certify copies, and she did it without asking a single question, which I will remember about her for the rest of my life. She stamped them, signed across the stamp, and said, "You want 2 sets?" 3. That afternoon, I called Fairhaven and asked for the independent living donor advocate. Every transplant center in this country has one. It's required. Their whole job is to stand on the donor's side of the table, to make sure nobody is being leaned on, bought, or hurried. In my file on page 5, there was a note signed by one in 2016, and the same name was still listed on the center's staff page in 2026. Rosalind Keene, RN. She called me back in 40 minutes. I said, "My name is Myra Sheridan. In 2016, I was a donor candidate at your center. I have my file in front of me. I have a question and then I'll let you go." "All right. Who reported my withdrawal?" There was a pause with paper in it. I could hear her scrolling. "The chronology says family contact of record." "I didn't withdraw," I said. "I was told I wasn't a match by the family contact of record." The scrolling stopped. I have spent 11 years in rooms with clinical people, and I know exactly what the next silence is. It's the sound of somebody's whole afternoon rearranging itself. "Ms. Sheridan," she said, "I'm going to ask you to send me copies of what you have, and I need to tell you that I am required to escalate this internally." Escalate it how far? Further than my desk. I sent it that night, scanned, with a cover page listing the documents in order, because I have watched what happens to information that arrives out of order. 2 days later, at 10 past 12, I was standing at Machine 6, taking Mrs. Petrarch off, and my supervisor came out onto the floor and asked if I could step into the office when I was done, and asked it in a voice with somebody else's words in it. There was a woman from HR in the office with a laptop. There had been a complaint, an anonymous complaint, submitted through the corporate compliance line, alleging that a technician at Cedar Ridge had been accessing patient medical records outside the scope of her duties and using her position to obtain information about a private family matter. They were required to investigate. Pending investigation, I was suspended, with pay, badge deactivated on my way out. The HR woman was decent about it. She said the words, "not a determination of wrongdoing," twice. I said, "May I ask when the complaint was filed?" She looked, "Tuesday, 4:11 p.m. I had walked out of my phone call with Rosalind Keene at 3:49 on Tuesday. I know because I write the time down when I get off a call that matters. It's a habit from charting. 22 minutes. 3 people on this earth knew that call had happened. Rosalind Keene, who is bound by policy and had nothing to gain. Me. And whoever Rosalind's escalation reached inside that building on its way up. My sister has done development work for a kidney foundation for 11 years. She has a badge that gets her into that hospital's donor clinic for photo shoots. She has coffee with people whose titles have the word community in them. I put my badge on the desk. It was still warm from my pocket. Here's what nobody tells you about being walked out. It isn't dramatic. You take your travel mug and the sweater off the back of your chair, and the photo of your husband at the lake, and Tessa is standing at the nurse's station with her hands at her sides, and Mr. Alderman is in the chair by the window with 2 hours left on his treatment, and he says, "Where are you going, Sheridan?" And you say, "I've got some appointments this week." And you drive out of the lot at 1 in the afternoon on a Thursday for the first time in 11 years. At home. I sat in the car in my own driveway for a while, and then went in and got the laundry out of the dryer and folded it. And Nolan came home at 6 and found every towel in our house folded in thirds on the bed. I didn't say anything about it. He put his hand on the back of my neck for a second on his way past. Sunday I drove to Delaney Street. My mother's car was there. My sister's was not. I came in the side door the way I've come in the side door my entire life, and my father was in his chair and the kitchen smelled like a chicken. And I got a glass of water at the sink, and I turned around. The pineapple magnet was still there. Under it was the program from the Northlight Kidney Foundation, folded open to page 2, with my sister in a green dress smiling into a room I hadn't been in yet. The graph paper was gone. The graph paper with 430 Miyo F pickup dad written on it in my ugly efficient handwriting that had lived on that refrigerator through 2 governors, a new roof, and a kidney. Where's the schedule? My mother didn't look up from the sink. It was greasy. It's been up there 10 years, Myra. It was filthy. Where is it? In the bin, I imagine. I went out to the garage and lifted the lid on the recycling, and it wasn't there, and I checked the trash bag by the mower, and it wasn't there either, and I stood in my parents' garage with a trash bag in my hand at 4 in the afternoon. My father came out and stood in the door to the kitchen with his glasses pushed up on his head. She threw out your paper, he said. It's fine. It's not fine. I told her not to. He came down the 1 step, careful, heel first. I like that paper. Dad, that paper's how I knew what day it was, he said. And then he did the thing where he pats the door frame twice and goes back in, because that's the end of what he can do with feelings. Tuesday morning, I got up at 6 and put on real clothes and drove to Delaney Street to take my father to his labs. They had moved him up 4 weeks, because his creatinine had bumped at the last straw and the clinic wanted another look. The driveway was empty. I called his cell and it rang out. I called the house and my mother picked up on the 4th ring and said, Corinne took him. She's put herself down as his contact at the clinic so they stop calling here. Since when? Since Friday. Then because she cannot help it. You've been very busy, Myra. I sat in that driveway with the engine running. On the porch railing was the plastic bag hook where I hang his prescriptions when I pick them up. Across the street, the Delaney's sprinkler came on. Wednesday, HR called and cleared me. It took them 6 days to establish what took me 9 seconds to say. I had never opened a chart. Every document I had came from a records office in a basement, requested on a form with my own driver's license, receipt in my own name, or from a payroll box behind a water heater, or from a county website that anybody with a library card can use. There was no access log with my name on it, because there was nothing to access. The complaint was, in the HR woman's phrasing, not substantiable. They reinstated me effective Monday and the woman said again, twice, that it was not a determination of wrongdoing. I said, can you tell me who filed it? They're anonymous by design. I understand. By then, it had already gotten out ahead of me, the way it does in a family with a parish in it. My aunt called the night I was walked out. She is my mother's older sister, and she has known me since the hour I was born, and she opened with, Sweetheart, are you sleeping? Then she said she'd heard I was making phone calls to the hospital. She said she'd heard I'd been put on leave from my job. She said, nobody's angry, we just want you to talk to somebody. I said, who told you I was on leave? She said she couldn't remember. The next day, my cousin's wife texted me a picture of a casserole dish and asked if I'd left it at the anniversary dinner. And then 3 dots came and went for a while, and then, we're all praying for you. 2 days after that, I ran into a woman from the parish in the produce aisle, and she put her hand on my forearm the way you do to the sick. 10 years I sat at those tables and said the sentence about my sister and the kidney, and it took my sister 9 days to build a different sentence about me and hand it out at coffee hour. Hers moves faster than mine ever did, because mine required a person to give something and hers only requires a person to worry. I stood in a grocery store with a bag of onions and did the arithmetic on what the 25th of July was going to be like if I walked in there with nothing but my own voice. That night, I laid the 6 documents out on the kitchen table again and looked at them for a long time. Paper doesn't get more true when people talk. That's the whole reason to have it. Then I made a 5th copy of everything and put it in the glove box of my car, because I have watched what happens to information that only exists in one place. Thursday, Rosalind Keene called me. I can't discuss another individual's records with you, she said, before hello, And then she said the rest of it in a voice with a lot of care in it. So I'm going to describe our process instead. Every living donor at this center is entered in the National Registry. Every one. There is a donor record, an operative report, and mandated follow-up submissions at 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. Yes. For the transplant you are asking about, there is a donor record. Yes. And the donor of record is not the individual who will be receiving a pin on the 25th. I stood in my kitchen with my hand flat on the counter. Say that again for me, please. I've said as much as I'm able to say to you, she said. I have referred this to our quality office and our legal department. I want to be honest with you about pace. That review will take weeks, possibly months. There will be no announcement before the event. The event is Saturday. I know when the event is. A pause. Miss Sheridan, may I say one thing outside of my role? Please. I sat with you in 2016, she said. You had a list of questions on a piece of graph paper. I remember you. After she hung up, I stood there for a minute, and then I got the accordion folder out of my bag and laid everything on the kitchen table, left to right, the way you go across a panel when an alarm sounds. The reservation printout. Party of 9, 2 prior visits, a name. The credit union history, 3 cashier's checks in March. The county recorder's page. A line against the house on Delaney Street in October, and a modification increasing it recorded in January of 2018. Page 11 of my file, 0912 family contact of record. The Greenbar time record, 0431 to 1306. Page 31. 3 lines of incidental findings and a routing note. What I didn't have was the one document that would put it beyond arguing in a room full of strangers, because that document does not belong to me. It belongs to my father. My father gets his hair cut on the 4th Thursday of the month at a shop with a striped pole and a coffee can of lollipops on the counter. I parked across the street at 10 and waited, and at 10:40 he came out patting the back of his neck the way men do and stopped on the sidewalk when he saw my car. He got in. He put his seatbelt on before he said anything, because he is a man who does things in order. Your mother says you've got a bee in you. Dad, I want to ask you for one thing and then I'll take you home. All right. I want to drive you to the clinic tomorrow, and I want you to ask them for a copy of your own records. Your surgery. Not me, you. You sign, they print, you read it. He looked out the windshield at the barber pole going around. Why? I had thought about this for 6 days. Every version of it I built in my head had me telling him, and every version ended with a 69-year-old man taking my word against his wife's and his favorite daughters, in a kitchen, with nothing in his hands. Because I don't want to be another person in your life who tells you what happened to you, I said. I want you to read it yourself. I didn't answer for 2 blocks. Then he said, that fella that came to the house, the quiet one. He turned his wedding ring around once. He asked me about my tacrolimus, right there at my own table with a fork in his hand. Nobody knows the name of that pill unless they've got a reason. I kept my eyes on the road. Your mother said he was from the hall, he said. I welded 31 years out of that hall, Myra. I never saw that man in my life. Friday morning at 9, we were at the records window in the basement at Fairhaven, and my father filled out the form himself, in block capitals, the way he fills out everything, and showed them his license, and they printed his transplant summary and his operative note, while we sat in 2 chairs against the wall under a poster about hand washing. They called his name. He went up. He came back with 11 pages and his glasses in his shirt pocket. He read standing up, he wouldn't sit down for it. I know exactly which line it was because I watched his thumb stop moving. Donor. Living unrelated donor. Directed. Donor and recipient not biologically related. Donor. Doyle. Emmett J. He read it. He read it again. I have his mother's habit in me, apparently. We are a family of people who read things twice. And then he sat down in the plastic chair with the pages on his knees, and his hands went flat on top of them like something might blow away. Where's Corinne's name? He said. It isn't in there. Where is it, Myra? It isn't anywhere, I said. There's no donor record at this center under her name. There's no follow-up. There's nothing. An orderly went by with a cart. Somewhere down the hall a door with a bad closer banged. 4 days, my father said. She was in a bed for 4 days. I sent flowers to that room. I know. She had... He stopped and made a small motion at his own belly, at the 3 little places, and then he stopped doing that too. He sat there a long time. He is not a crying man. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, once, and looked at the poster about hand washing. And then he said the thing I did not expect and will hear for the rest of my life. Whose money? Mine, I said. 38,000 out of my account in March. The rest off the house, in October and again in 18. He nodded slowly. He is a man who understands a line of credit against a house better than he understands a hospital. That was your down payment, he said. Yes. You sat at my table at Christmas and your mother asked why you two were still renting. Yes. My father folded the 11 pages in half and put them inside his jacket, and stood up and put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed once, hard, the way he does when he cannot do anything else. Take me home, he said, then come get me at 5 tomorrow. I'll need help with the tie. The phone rang at 1 in the morning. I was awake. I'd been awake since midnight with the ceiling. Don't hang up, my sister said. I didn't say anything. I know you talked to Rosalind Keene. Her voice was perfectly level. I know you've been in a basement with a hospital form. I know you drove out to Marlow County, Myra, because he called Mom in a panic at 11 o'clock at night, that poor man, and now he can't sleep either. Are you proud of that? Down the hall, our refrigerator cycled on. Here's what I'm offering, she said. Come tomorrow. Sit at Dad's table, smile for the photo, clap when they call my name. Monday, Mom signs the house money back over to you, all of it. We'll take it off the line of credit, and you can put it in a bank with your husband's name on it and buy your little house. Nobody has to be destroyed. You want to pay me $38,000 to sit still? I want to buy my father one nice night, she said. There's a difference. And if you weren't so hungry to be the wounded one, you'd see it. I stood up and walked to the kitchen because I wanted my hand on something cold. Corinne, I said, what did the letter from radiology say? The line went quiet. Not silent. I could hear a television going somewhere in her house, some man's voice reading news at 1 in the morning. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. August of 2016, a letter mailed to the contact of record. You're not well, my sister said. You have never been well since the second one, and everyone in this family has been very patient about it. Then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen and my hands were shaking so hard I had to put the glass down on the counter with both of them. And I want to be accurate with you. It wasn't fear. It's the same shake I get after a bad coat on the floor, when it's over and your body finally gets to have its opinion. At 2 in the morning, I ironed my father's shirt. The Fairhaven Regional 10th Annual Living Donor Celebration was held in the ballroom of the Marlow Grand on the 25th of July, 6 o'clock, black tie optional. 250 people. I know the number because it was in the program. A sold-out room, 25 tables of 10, a silent auction along the back wall with baskets wrapped in cellophane, a slideshow on 2 screens, and a podium down front with the center's logo on the panel. I got my father at 5. He'd shaved and cut himself under the jaw. I did his tie in the hallway of the house on Delaney Street, while my mother stood at the top of the stairs in her good navy dress with her hands at her waist. Gareth, she said, Corinne is expecting to bring you. Myra drives me, my father said. That was all. 41 years of marriage and a man saying 3 words at the bottom of a staircase. Nolan was at home. My sister's office had put exactly 1 guest card in that envelope with my father's name on it, and my husband had said fine and had taken the 5th copy of everything and put it on our kitchen table and said he would sit with it until I called. In the truck, my father had the 11 pages inside his jacket, and I had an accordion folder on the back seat with 4 sets of everything, and neither of us said 1 word for the whole 20 minutes. And when I parked, he put his hand on the door and said, You don't have to do it. I know. If you do it, they'll never forgive you. He looked at the windshield. You know that. They don't forgive me now, I said. They just haven't told me why. There is a table by the door at those events with name cards laid out in rows. Vance, Gareth, recipient, table 1. And beside it, because someone in an office had done their job carefully weeks ago, Sheridan, Myra, guest of honoree family, table 1. My sister had put me at the front table. Of course she had. You don't leave the wounded one in the back where she can stand up in the dark. Rosalind Keene was inside the door in a gray dress with her badge still clipped to it, and when she saw me, her chin came up half an inch. I walked over. I handed her a folder. This is a copy for the center, I said. Everything I sent you, plus my father's operative note, which he requested himself this morning. She took it. She held it against her chest with both arms. I can't act on this tonight, she said. I want you to understand that. Legal has it. There's a process. I know. Ms. Sheridan. She glanced at the podium, at the pin box sitting on the table beside it with the center's seal on the lid. What are you going to do? I'm going to sit with my father, I said. And when they open the floor, I'm going to ask a question. At the back of the room, near the auction tables, a big man in a gray suit that didn't fit him at the shoulders was standing with a coffee cup. He wasn't drinking. Emmett Doyle had been to the donor follow-up clinic on the 9th of July and had a nephrologist for the first time in 10 years, and he had told me on the phone Wednesday that he had never once been inside a room like this. And I had told him he did not have to come, and he had said, I know what I don't have to do. I wasn't there for me. He was there because in 10 years, nobody had said his name out loud in a room with my father in it. Dinner was chicken. There were remarks from a hospital vice president about the campaign for the new outpatient wing. My father ate almost nothing and kept his hand near his jacket pocket. My mother sat 2 seats down and did not look at either of us. My sister was at the podium end of the table in the green dress from page 2, and she reached over twice to squeeze our father's wrist, and both times he moved his hand. At 8 o'clock, the lights came down and the 2 screens came up, and the center's medical director, a tall man with reading glasses on a cord, welcomed everyone and said the sentence they say at all of these. There is no more ordinary form of heroism than a person who gives a part of their body to keep somebody else in the world. Then he read her citation. 10 years ago, Corinne Vance gave a kidney to her father, Gareth. Tonight we honor her, and we honor the family behind her. The room stood up, 250 people, on their feet, in the dark, applauding, and the 2 screens filled with a photograph of my sister in a hospital bed in September of 2016, with her hair down and a blanket to her chin, and my mother's hand on her forehead. I sat there with my hands in my lap and watched my father look at that photograph. She went up. She hugged the medical director. She adjusted the microphone down 2 inches, which is the small, competent gesture of a woman who has stood behind a lot of microphones, and she waited for the room to settle. When they wheeled me in that morning, my sister said, I wasn't brave. I want to be honest with you, because I think we do donors a disservice when we make it sound easy. She let a beat go by. She's good. I'm not going to pretend she isn't good. I was terrified, she said. But I thought about my dad and I thought, he has carried this family on his back since he was 19 years old, and today I get to carry him. Somebody at table 9 said amen. She talked about recovery and about the follow-up appointments and about how the scar had faded and how she barely thinks about it now, except when she's at the beach. Then she said, and the truth is, the donor is the easy part. It's the families who do the hard part. It's the ones who drive. And she looked straight at me across the table and smiled and lifted her glass a half-inch off the tablecloth. She had never once, in 10 years, said that in a room. She said it that night at 8:15 from a podium because she is not stupid and because she had seen the accordion folder under my chair. My father put his napkin on the table. The medical director came back to the microphone with the pin box and said the part I had been waiting 9 days for, and I want you to hear it in full because he was reading from a card and he had no idea what he was reading. Before I present, we like to observe the tradition of the role, he said. Center, date of donation, and the donor's number of years of follow-up. It's how we honor the whole journey. Corinne, Fairhaven Regional, September 2016, and your follow-up. He looked at his card. He turned it over. He looked up at the coordinator standing at the side of the stage with a tablet in her hands, and she was already frowning down at it, scrolling, and the room did not know yet, and the band was not playing, and 250 people were waiting politely, and my father stood up out of his chair. The coordinator with the tablet came 3 steps toward the podium and put her hand over the microphone stem to say something private, and in a room that quiet, a hand over a microphone is its own announcement. The medical director listened. Then he straightened up and said, in the pleasant voice men use when they are stalling, it looks like we may have a records issue with the follow-up entries. We'll sort that out. Let's not hold up the... There's no records issue. That was my sister. She had the microphone. Nobody took it from her. She laughed, and it was a good laugh, warm and a little embarrassed, and she put her hand on the director's arm. I'm so sorry, everyone. This is my fault. She turned to the room. My younger sister has been going through something very hard for a few years now. She's been calling this hospital. She's been contacting people. She lost 2 pregnancies and she has never been the same. And our family has protected her privacy as long as we could. And I'm not going to stand up here and pretend. She said it into a microphone, in a ballroom, to 250 people, half of whom were holding dessert forks. She said my losses out loud to strangers to keep a pin. Something in my chest went very quiet and very cold, and my hands stopped doing anything at all. I stood up. I did not shout. There's no version of me that shouts. My mother trained that out of both of us, and then only one of us kept it. My name is Myra Sheridan, I said, into the room, without a microphone, in the voice I use at 4 in the morning, when a machine is alarming, and everybody needs the weather to sound normal. I'm a dialysis technician, 11 years. I have 6 documents. 4 of them are mine, 2 came from a bank and a county clerk, and 1 belongs to my father, and he asked for it himself yesterday morning at the records window in the basement of this hospital. My father was still on his feet at the head of the table. That's right, he said. He held up the 11 pages. That's my name on the form. Read it. The director came down off the little step and took them. And he did the thing that saved this whole night from being a woman's word against a woman's word. He read it silently first, the way a professional does, and his face did nothing at all, which told everybody in that ballroom more than a scream would have. Then he put the pages back into my father's hands with both of his. Then he read the line out loud because my father told him to. Donor, living unrelated donor directed. Donor and recipient not biologically related. 250 people made the sound a room makes. I put the rest on the table in front of me, left to right, the way you go across a panel. Page 11 of my own donor evaluation file from this center, which I requested with my driver's license in June, I said. 20th of August 2016, 9:12 in the morning. Telephone contact from family contact of record. Donor candidate withdrawing. Chart closed per family request. I picked up the next one. Page 9 of the same file. Cross-match negative. I was compatible with my father. I picked up the next one. Certified copy of my time record from Cedar Ridge Dialysis for the 20th of August 2016. A Saturday I worked because I had taken a coworker's rotation, and she remembers it. In at 4:31 in the morning. Out at 1:06 in the afternoon. At 9:12 I initialed a flow sheet at machine 6. I have the flow sheet too. Then I said the part I had only worked out 4 days earlier, standing in my kitchen with a bank statement in one hand and a hospital file in the other. The money left my account in March, I said. My evaluation at this center didn't open until July. She had a donor bought and paid for months before I ever filled out a form, and she let me get typed and imaged and interviewed by an advocate anyway. She let me lie on a table with contrast in my arm, because she needed a version of this where the little sister got scared and quit on her father, and you cannot have that story without a girl who tried. Nobody in that ballroom moved. A server stood by the wall with a coffee pot in each hand. I never withdrew, I said. I was told in a parking lot that I wasn't a match. By the family contact of record, whose phone number is on page 3 of my file. My sister said, "This is a private family." The donor of record's follow-up, I said, over her, to the coordinator with the tablet, is dated the 9th of this month. His first appointment in 10 years. I made it for him. He's standing at the back of the room. Everybody turned around. Emmett Doyle put his coffee cup down on the auction table because he needed both hands to do it. Then he stood the way he'd stood up in the diner booth, all the way, and he took his glasses off and held them, and he did not say one word, and he looked at my father across 100 feet of ballroom carpet. My father said his name, just that, Emmett, and a big man at the back of a room in a suit that didn't fit him at the shoulders nodded once at a 69-year-old welder. And that was the entire conversation, and it was the loudest thing I have ever heard. There are 2 more facts and then I'll sit down, I said. Somebody at table 4 said quietly, "Let her talk." In March of 2016, $38,000 left a credit union account in my name in 3 cashier's checks. It was money I earned between the ages of 17 and 24. In October of 2016, a home equity line was opened against my parents' house on Delaney Street, and a modification increasing that line was recorded in January of 2018. Those recordings are public. Anyone in this room can look them up tonight on their phone for free. I looked at the pin box on the table beside the podium. Paying a person for an organ is a federal crime in this country, I said. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the one who decides, but there are people in this room whose job it is. The silence went on long enough that I could hear the ice machine behind the service doors. My sister came off the podium fast. She came around the end of the head table and reached across two place settings and took the pages off the tablecloth, grabbed them with her whole hand, the way you'd grab a plate. And a water glass went over, and the tablecloth pulled, and the certified time record tore straight down the middle in her fist because my father had his other hand on it. 250 people watched a woman in a green dress rip a piece of green bar paper in half at a charity dinner. She stood there with her half of it, and my mother stood up at her seat, and she looked around that ballroom at all those faces, and she screamed the exact same sentence she screamed in a steakhouse on the 18th of June, in the exact same voice, because it was the only lever she had ever needed, and she reached for it one more time. Take it back before your father sees that name. Nobody said anything. My father was standing 4 feet from her with the other half of the paper in his hand. Adele, he said, I read it this morning. My mother sat down. She sat down the way a coat falls off a hook. The medical director closed the lid of the pin box. He did it quietly, and he did not make a speech about it. And then he said, into the microphone, that the presentation was suspended pending review by the center, that the matter would be referred to the center's quality office and legal counsel, and to the national network that maintains the donor registry, and that he was sorry to the families in the room whose evening this was, and that the bar would remain open. The executive director of the Northlight Kidney Foundation was already out in the hallway with a phone to her ear. She had left table 3 before my mother finished screaming. I found out the rest over the following days the way everybody else did, in pieces. Corinne was placed on leave from the foundation on Monday morning, and her staff page came down by Tuesday. The center notified the National Organ Network. A compliance officer called me on Wednesday and asked me to walk him through the timeline twice, slowly, and then asked whether I would repeat it to an investigator from a federal agency, and I said yes. He asked me one other thing, near the end, in the flat way those people ask, whether I knew of any surgery my sister had had in the fall of 2016. I did, as it happens. My aunt drove her. My aunt still complains about it because the hospital was 40 miles north of us, and she got lost twice on the way, and she has never understood why a girl would go that far out of her way for a gallbladder. 4 days, 3 little holes, my mother made soup. No one has been charged. That takes as long as it takes. I have stopped counting the days, and I have stopped needing it to be fast. The line of credit against the house on Delaney Street has 11 years left on it. But here's the part I keep, and it happened before any of that, in that ballroom, maybe 90 seconds after my mother sat down. My father asked the medical director if he could use the microphone. He went up. He didn't adjust it. He is a foot taller than my sister, and he just leaned down to it, the way he'd lean down to a valve. And he reached inside his jacket, past the 11 pages, and brought out a piece of graph paper folded into thirds. It was soft at the folds. There was a grease spot on the corner. He had gone out to the garage on a Sunday night in July with a flashlight, 69 years old, and gone through a recycling bin to get it back, and he had not told me, and he had been carrying it in his suit jacket all evening. He put his glasses on. My daughter made this, he said. Not that one, that one. He pointed at me with 2 fingers without looking up. 2014. I was on the machine 3 days a week for 25 months. He held it out flat toward the room, and the man at the AV table did something quick and clever, and it came up on both screens, 8 feet tall. A piece of graph paper with my terrible handwriting on it. 3:45, my father read. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Pick up Dad. 4:15 chair. 9:30 Mom picks up. He looked up. She did that before her shift. Then she went and did her shift. I took his glasses off. Nobody claps for that, he said. There's no dinner for that. I never said thank you to her one time in 25 months, because you don't say it, because she'd have been there anyway, and that's how a man lets it go by. He folded the paper back into thirds. He got it right on the first try. That's my kidney doctor's business who's inside me, my father said. But that girl is who kept me alive till I got there. I'd like somebody to write that down somewhere. 250 people stood up. I stayed in my seat, because my legs weren't going to hold, and because I have spent my entire life on the correct side of a rule that says we do not make scenes where strangers can watch. And because a room was standing up and my father was pointing at me, and I have wanted somebody to say that out loud in front of witnesses since I was 22 years old. I'm going to ask you for one thing and then I'll finish. If there's someone in your life who does the 4:30 drive, the one who fills the pill organizer, who knows which pharmacy, who has never once been thanked because thanking them would mean admitting somebody had to say their name out loud to another person this week, out loud where it counts. That's it. That's the whole ask. On the 29th of July, I sat on a paper-covered table with page 31 in my hand while a specialist read it, and then read it again, and then turned her monitor around so I could see the ultrasound. She said, "This is very fixable." She said it takes about 40 minutes and it's outpatient, and I'd be home the same day, and that plenty of women go on to carry after it, and that she was sorry, and that she wished someone had called me in 2016. I said, "Somebody did, they just didn't call me. They've given me a date in the fall. It's on my refrigerator right now, circled in the same pen I've used for 10 years, on the corner of a piece of graph paper that my father ironed flat with a dish towel before he gave it back to me. Emmett Doyle sees a nephrologist at Fairhaven every 3 months now. The center is covering it. It turns out that when a donor has gone 10 years without the 2 years of follow-up that were his by right, and without one phone call after that, an institution finds the money quickly. His numbers are not good, and they are not hopeless. On a Sunday not long after, he sat on my parents' porch with my father, and they didn't talk much. And when he left, my father walked him to his truck. My mother has called and called. I answered one of them. She said she did what she had to do for her husband. She said I'd humiliated the family in front of the whole city. She said, "You have to understand, we were losing him." I said, "You had a match. You threw her away, and you bought a stranger instead, because if I gave him a kidney, I'd have been somebody in this family." She said that wasn't true. I said, "Then tell me what was in the letter from radiology." My mother did not answer that question. She has not answered it yet. I told her what happens now. No Sundays for a while. She can call on the 1st of the month and I'll pick up. My father comes to my house on Tuesdays and I drive him to his labs, and she can come with him when she's ready to say one true sentence. And until then she doesn't come. She cried. I let her cry, and I didn't take it back, and then I hung up and went and folded a dish towel into thirds and put it on the oven handle and left it there. Nolan and I are still renting. The money isn't back and it may never come back, and I've made a kind of peace with the arithmetic. I was the down payment. I was the 22,000 at the clinic. For 10 years in that family, my whole worth was that I could be spent quietly. That's over now. Not because I won anything. Because 250 people watched a 69-year-old man hold up a piece of graph paper. I went back to work on a Tuesday. Machine 6, 4:30 in the morning, badge reactivated, the same hum, the same smell of bleach and warm dialysate. Mr. Alderman was in the chair by the window, and he had a butterscotch candy in his fist for me, and he wanted to tell me about the Buick. I sat down on the stool beside him, and I checked his access, and I got the flow where I wanted it. And he said, "Where'd you go, Sheridan?" And I said, "I went and got my name back."